Hello, my name is Jennifer, and I would like to talk to you about voting rights for prisoners. I think felons and those that are in prison should still be able to vote because they are still part of this country and should still be allowed to help make decisions. I think letting prisoners vote could be beneficial when it comes to justice reform because they know firsthand how the system works and what ways the system has failed them. People who are in prison are serving their time for the crime they committed, and inmates are still responsible for paying federal income tax on all taxable income. Prisoners still purchase items with their commissary money, and that affects the economy. Jobs are made because of the prison system, and that also helps the economy. So, if prisoners are still treated like citizens when it comes to paying their taxes, then why can't the prisoners still have a right and a responsibility to vote? It seems that the government wants to make them still pay taxes, but doesn't want prisoners to have a say in the laws in their country. So let's talk about racial disparities. Racial disparities in the prison system and how that affects voting. According to a study done by sentenceproject.org, felony disenfranchisement policies in the United States impact people of color disproportionately. Compared to the rest of the voting age population, African Americans are 4 times more likely to lose their voting rights. More than 7.4% of African American adults are banned from voting due to felony convictions. Meanwhile, only 1.8% of those who are not African American are banned from voting. When the numbers are that high, there is no way minorities are able to be represented in voting and the laws that will affect them. There are a few places that do not have disenfranchisement, like Maine and Vermont. Maine and Vermont have unrestricted voting rights for people who are felons. Both of these states allow the person to vote during incarceration via absentee ballot and via in-person voting after completion of their sentence. The District of Columbia voted to allow the incarcerated to vote in the 2020 presidential election, but it is not a permanent law yet. Puerto Rico has permitted prisoners to vote absentee since 1980. Way to go, Puerto Rico. According to Wikipedia, as of 2008, over 5.3 million people in the United States were denied the right to vote due to felony disenfranchisement. In the national election in 2012, the various state felony disenfranchisement laws together blocked an estimated 5.85 million felons from voting. That's up from 1.2 million in 1976. This comprised 2.5% of the potential voters in general. The state with the highest number of disenfranchised voters was Florida, with 1.5 million disenfranchised. In October of 2020, it was estimated that 5.1 million citizens were disenfranchised for the 2020 presidential election on account of a felony conviction. That's 1 in 44 citizens. That's a lot. Another study released by the Sentencing Project said that nearly 900,000 Floridians with felony convictions are unable to vote because of a law signed by Governor Ron DeSantis last year, which required them to pay all court fees, fines, or restitution before voting. That is terrible in so many ways because it is really hard to pay off your fines when you can't obtain a job because you are a felon. That goes into another issue of the box, getting rid of the box. Some good news on this issue is that former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg donated nearly $16 million to a fund that is paying fines and court fees of felons in Florida so they can vote in the 2020 presidential election, which already happened. Desmond Meade heads the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, the group behind the voter initiative known as Amendment 4. Their goal was $25,000 and they have already Their goal was $25 million and they have already helped over 4,000 felons pay off their fines. Most states will allow released inmates to apply to have their voting rights reinstated, but this is just one more barrier that people will have to go through just to vote, and I think some people won't think it's worth the effort. It's hard enough to get people who aren't felons to vote. A concern that was brought up about allowing felons to vote while still incarcerated was corruption. Potential issues with the corrections officers threatening inmates to vote a certain way or having the officers conduct fraud with the ballots. I think a good solution to this This fear would be to have an official like watchdog there to hand out the ballots and to collect them. This way they have an official taking care of the votes. I personally do not think voting fraud will be a huge issue, but it is always good to look for issues that could arise. An article I read on the heritage.org website stated that if you're not willing to follow the law, then you should not have a role in making the law for everyone else, which is what you do when you vote, either directly in the case of referendum or ballot initiative, or indirectly by choosing lawmakers and law enforcers. In my opinion, people break the law all the time, whether running red lights or speeding or worse crimes that are misdemeanors, and still keep their voting rights. So to say that the prisoners shouldn't be allowed to vote because they broke a law is hypocritical and should be a violation of their rights. Voting is a right and a privilege. You are in prison because you're paying your debt to society for the crime you committed, and I think that your rights as a human are still valid and should be protected. I believe allowing inmates to vote will help gap the inequality and racial disparity that affects all of us. People need to have a voice. That's what freedom is all about, and the best way people can have a voice is by voting. Here's a great quote by Shakira Cook, the program director at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. It goes, "No democracy can say it's legitimate, nor will survive, when one group of people is disproportionately subjected to the coercive power of the police, prosecution, the courts, and prisons, and it is consequently stripped of voting rights." These are the reasons why I feel felons and prisoners should retain their voting rights. Thank you.